Justice Ariwala of the Supreme Court that's yesterday, I should say, took the judicial oath of office as the acting Chief Justice of Nigeria. President Muhammad Buhari administered the oath of office at the council chambers of the presidential villa in Abuja, the nation's capital. State House correspondent Adesua Omoran reports.
Not many expected history to repeat itself this Monday morning. Nigeria's Chief Justice, Tanko Mohammed, who had over a year into his tenure, resigns, making him the second CJN after Justice Walter Onoge under the Buhari administration to leave office before expiration of their tenure. In a swift reaction, an inauguration is held to fill the vacuum. Justice Ariwala, the next most senior justice of the Supreme Court, arrives the council chambers in the company of fellow justices of the Supreme Court to take the oath of office in acting capacity.
I, Ariwala, do solemnly swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
President Muhammad Buhari, who accepts the resignation of the outgone CJN, gives the reason as poor health.
Earlier today, I received a letter from the Honorable Justice Dr. Tanko Mohammed, CFR, resigning his position as Chief Justice of Nigeria and Chairman of the National Judicial Council on health grounds. The resignation is to take immediate effect.
Bestowing on him the second highest honor of the land, the President praises Justice Tanko Mohammed for what he terms his modest contributions to Nigeria's judiciary, the strengthening of democracy, and national development.
His era witnessed several landmark jurisprudential and policy decisions by the Supreme Court and by extension other courts established by the Constitution. CJN Tanko dealt firmly with the issue of reckless and indiscriminate grant of ex parte orders that was assuming serious dimensions. History will be kind to Justice Tanko Mohammed for his modest contributions to Nigeria's judiciary, the strengthening of our democracy, and national development.
President Buhari admonishes the justices of the Supreme Court to always remain faithful and bear true allegiance to the Federal Republic of Nigeria, even as the country heads to a general election next year. Although the erstwhile CJN was said to have resigned on health grounds, he's been immersed in controversies and most recently, an unprecedented blistering accusations from 14 justices of the Apex Court in an open letter accusing him of corruption, maladministration, and lack of human resource management. In his first interaction with the media after being sworn in, the acting CJN clarifies that the leaked memo was not a petition and the issues raised have been resolved.
There is no controversy in the Supreme Court. We are one with the Chief Justice. That's why you heard the President said his Lordship is disengaging on the grounds of ill health. It was an internal memo of the court. It was not a petition. It was not a letter. It was addressed by the brother justices of the Chief Justice and presented to him, his Lordship, directly. There were issues to be resolved amongst justices.
Justice Ariwala was born on August 22nd, 1954. He was appointed a judge of the Oyo State High Court in 1992 and later a justice of the Court of Appeal in November 2005. Justice Ariwala was appointed a justice of the Supreme Court on November 22nd, 2011 by President Goodluck Jonathan. He is an indigene of Ishayin in Oyo State, southwest Nigeria. Many will be waiting to see if he will be nominated to the Senate as the substantive Chief Justice of Nigeria.
From the presidential villa here in Abuja, Adesua, Omoran for Arise News.
And following Justice Tanko Mohammed's resignation, the Nigerian Bar Association is calling for urgent reforms, in quotes, in the judiciary. NBA President Olumide Akpata, while commending Mohammed for his lengthy service to the nation, also said his resignation could not be divorced from the raging crisis in the Supreme Court. Akpata says, in quotes, there is now more than ever the need for urgent reforms in the judiciary and to rebuild the most dissipated confidence that Nigerians have in the judiciary and the wider legal profession in Nigeria. These should form the immediate first task for the Honorable Mr. Justice Olukayode Ariwala. Well, urgent first task indeed.
Yes,
I mean, it's, yeah, thank you, Rufai. It's rather convenient, isn't it, the timing of this resignation due to ill health. But this is the reason that he has stated. I would actually have hoped that he would say he's resigning because of that leaked memo by 14, no less, of his colleagues, and really just set an example of if you're found wanting in the, prosecution of your duties, then you step down. That, I think, would have written his name in gold in history. I think the only person who has ever really stepped down to protect the dignity of their office was the former Minister of Finance, Kemi Adesua. I wish he had actually said that instead of using this ill health, because what that suggests to me is my colleagues have, it's gotten deteriorated to the level where my colleagues have had to write this memo. In spite of that, I don't care about the objections that they raised. And they raised very serious objections about the way the Supreme Court is run and the way their lives are run, quite frankly. So what that suggests is I really don't care about them. I'm resigning just because, I'm in poor health. And that for me is extremely worrying. That's the last thing that is needed as a response to a memo of such seriousness. And it's not only in Nigeria that we've had leaked memos from the Supreme Court. Recently in America that happened. And that really happens when it's a very serious situation and urgent public attention needs to be drawn to a matter. This is the Supreme Court, no less. And we have our justices of the Supreme Court sort of languishing in near penury. It's really quite awful. Mrs. Braithwaite puts it very movingly in her piece today in This Day, talking about how they don't even have homes to retire to. They retire in really poverty because their salaries are meager, so their pensions will match their salaries. She really humanized what those justices were talking about, because we do tend to look at the Supreme Court justices as just so aloof and detached. It's very important to realize and remember that these are human beings. When they're talking about how there's one standard applied to primus inter pares, really, he's first among equals, and they've been treated comparatively really badly. When the budgetary allocation is there, but it's been poorly administered, this is extremely serious, and he should have highlighted that. However, his era is over. His own chapter is now closed. I hope that the new acting CJN, Justice Ariwala, who's one of the 14 that signed it, will really put his money where his mouth is. Not that he actually has a chance to make a difference. It is of crucial importance for the administration of justice in this country. It must start from the Supreme Court. It's such an urgent situation, and I hope that all the necessary steps are taken to resolve this problem, because really it has very serious consequences, right, Dr. Batsi?
Dr. Batsi.
Yes, certainly. But first, on the question of the grounds for his resignation, under Section 231, subsection 4 of the Constitution, Section 231 talks about the duties, functions, and powers of the Chief Justice of Nigeria. But under Section 231, subsection 4, he can resign. He can, if he dies, then of course he's out of the place. Then of course he can also say, well, he can no longer carry on if he's incapacitated. So in this case, it will look as if incapacitation, is the excuse. However, it is also curious that many Nigerians and observers of the situation at the Supreme Court do not seem to think that ill health is the main reason, given the timing and the circumstances. Now, as for the timing, we have to step back in history. About this time, in 2019, there was also turbulence at the Supreme Court of Nigeria, when in January 2019, an NGO activist, a civil society activist, suddenly came up and said that, look, there were issues surrounding the then CJN, Justice Walter Kanu Onogen, who was accused of false declaration of assets, who was accused of running foreign accounts against the rules of the Code of Conduct Bureau. And all of that happened eventually. Instead of being taken to the National Judicial Council, which is the judicial body, the disciplinary body for the judiciary, he ended up eventually in the Code of Conduct Tribunal on a 6-count charge. He was convicted on all the charges, and he ended up resigning. Now, he himself, 2 years later, came around and said, no, he wasn't taken out because of errors of judgment on his part, that he had to be taken out because he purportedly was accused of having had a meeting with then presidential flag bearer of the People's Democratic Party, former Vice President Atiku Abubakar, who again is the standard bearer for the same party at this time. So the question you ask is, well, does the administration, the current administration, does it change chief justices of Nigeria when it is almost election time, knowing that there will be petitions, there will be tribunals, and the executive arm of government will be interested in the outcome of such petitions? That's one. The second, of course, has to do with the petition by their lordships, 14 of them, led by Justice Oluka Ariwala, who is now the acting CJN. Well, his name came first, I guess, because he's the most senior, next in rank to the CJN that has just left. He said it was supposed to be an internal memo, but it got leaked. Who leaked it? Things don't just leak for fun in Nigeria. They are oftentimes leaked deliberately. And that caused turmoil. It exposed the internal politics within the bench, and by extension, the judiciary in Nigeria. And these were 14 Supreme Court justices accusing their brother justice, who is the CJN, or who was the CJN, of corruption, of gallivanting around with his children, personal staff, and assistants. Whereas their lordships, who are supposed to do the main work, they have no access to internet services, they have no access to vehicles. I wouldn't be surprised if some of those Supreme Court justices, before leaving home in the morning, have to call neighbors to jumpstart whatever vehicle they are using. Second-hand vehicles, some people have said. Also no access to electricity, during court sessions and all of that. All kinds of infractions in the Temple of Justice at the highest level. And in that their letter, they even threatened that if nothing was done, because in March they had met with this former CJN and nothing happened, and that they would take further steps. Since the letter came out, none of them had denied it. Justice Ariwala, after he's taking note of office, said it was an internal memo. No, it's not an internal memo. It's a matter of public interest, with due respect. So all of that is there. And then within that same period, we also had this issue of, the ruling in the case of hijab in secondary schools, in public secondary schools in Lagos State, and all that drama, if you like, melodrama, on the grounds of the Supreme Court. So it will appear that indeed the position of the CJN had become untenable. He had lost the confidence of his colleagues. So, which is why the relevant question is, was he pushed or did he jump? Now, we may not know what the exact truth is. What we know is that he has taken his exit as the Chief Justice of Nigeria, having spent roughly about 3.5 years in that position. But there are residual issues. The key residual issues have already been identified by the president of the Nigerian Bar Association and his colleagues, who in a letter have called for emphasis on transparency and accountability and the need to put mechanisms in place for ensuring that the apex court of the land is above board like Caesar's wife. I think it's scandalous for their lordships, for the CJN, to be accused of corruption, of mismanagement of funds, of abuse of processes that should lead to proper welfare for the justices of the Supreme Court and down the line within the hierarchy of courts. Now, in any case, the implication of that if Supreme Court justices are not well taken care of, if judges generally are not well taken care of, then of course they will be at the mercy of politicians. And the point has been made by those who have worked at the Supreme Court that, look, many of these cases, political cases, get accelerated hearing. Other cases are just dropped there. There are persons who have business regularly at the Supreme Court who have said, in fact, for you to get a notice of appearance, you will have to trial. So, which means that it may not just be about the departed CJN. The management of the Supreme Court also probably has to be overhauled. We also have to look in that direction. And it's not only the Nigerian Bar Association that is calling for mechanisms being put in place, budgetary processes of the Supreme Court being properly defined. Now, some other lawyers, branch chairmen, and former secretary generals of branches of the NBA, they are saying that no, Justice Ibrahim Tanko Mohammed should not just be given a national honor and commended by the president, that in fact the first step should have been for him to address those questions raised by his brother justices and other stakeholders. And that, you know, if it was good enough to do that with Justice Watan Kanu Onogan, the same process should be followed with regard to Justice Ibrahim Tanko Mohammed. Okay, you know what the subtext in that regard is, but I don't want to go there. But I think those who are asking for reform are also right. And that is where the work of Justice Ariwala is cut out for him, right? I mean, he's an experienced man. Those who know him say that he's very diligent. Graduate of Obafemi Awolowo University, native of Isenyi, Oyo State. Yesterday there was dancing on the streets of Isenyi that their son is now the Chief Justice of Nigeria. But due process will still have to be followed. Yeah. Recommendations will have to be made by the Federal Judicial Service Commission and the National Judicial Council to the President of Nigeria, who will now make appropriate representation to the Senate for confirmation. But the job ahead of the next Chief Justice of Nigeria is to reform that apex court and also to restore the integrity of the judiciary. As I said the other time, if good rose, what will I undo? If we're told that Supreme Court justices now are looking on to politicians for a ride to the court, I mean, then of course the will of justice has been grounded, literally, if that were to be the case.
Okay, I'll quickly take this second story and I'll make my analysis on both issues. Okay, I'm told okay. Transporters and trailer drivers in the upper parts of Lagos State have sent a save our soul message to the Lagos State Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu, Speaker of the Lagos State House of Assembly, Mudashiru Obaza, over illegal extortion, stealing of export trucks and loads in Apapa, and assault of drivers. The drivers obstructed Apapa Highway in Eleganza roundabout, causing restrictions of vehicular movement for about 2 hours. Speaking one of the journalists, the transporter Friday Paul, and the truck driver Ali Aziz appealed to those saddled with ensuring free flow of traffic in Apapa to stop extortion and harassment of drivers.
Because of the extortion, the last man, tow, MPA, road safety, area boys is taking for we truckers. God make her come to our end. Where you follow my 2 roads to Tinka, we spend almost 78,000 naira. It's much. Most of our members will park their truck. We want government to bring their price down. They're not supposed to take more than 1,500 naira to book a tow. Why we pay almost 40-something, 50,000 naira on a tow? What for? How much are they paying us for a job? Look at the price of diesel. Diesel is 900 naira per liter. You take a job from here, you are going to Okoko. Arabo will take more than 30,000 naira for road. Let government checkmate them. Let government come.
What we need from government is that they should help us look toward our works, because we didn't have any other way. This is the only way we are taking to manage our family. Please, they should please help us. The area boys are in our gain, and while we are still struggling, I hope this view will reach them. And I'm pleading them by the name of God. At least everyone is working to earn his sweat. Please, the more we are working, is the more we are paying those area boys. At least some area boys like Amuodofi now, each single local government, they are giving us more than 5 tickets. And single ticket of their ticket is 1,000 naira. Without paying them, they will start beating drivers.
Right. That's a lot happening. So I think I'll try to juxtapose the first story, we took with this other one as regards the truck drivers. So, there's a Yoruba adage that says the witch cried yesterday, the child died today. How can you exonerate the witch from the death of the child? And I think that's pretty much what happened. You cannot exonerate the Chief Justice, and the resignation from the letter that was written. And it's good you put it out there. And I think a lot of people should go out there and read, that wonderful article by our soon-to-be-gone, by the grace of God, we're praying for her son on Opeko Bretwitz. There was a part of that article, Tunda and Dr. Bati, that she said that magistrates and just don't even have cars of their own. Dr. Bati, we were talking about push and start, that some of them don't even have cars in the first place, that some of them enter public transports. So just imagine, magistrate that's about to judge a case in the public transport based on something that a party to that case see, and they see the person in the public transport. I mean, what do you think will happen to that case? And that's the Nigeria we've built on corruption. And we forget that this is a co-equal arm of government. My basic social studies teaches me executive, legislative, and judiciary. But judiciary doesn't take a prominent role any longer. Even look at the legal process. I've had to be in court for a case for about 3 to 4 years. I think I should write specific memoirs about my experience in the Nigerian courts and why it's hard for people to get justice. And all of this cascade back to problems here and there. We saw the raid on Supreme Court justices. We saw all of that. We saw cases of corruption. We saw the way ex parte orders were flying front, back, and center. And we are wondering what is causing all this corruption. You can't pull it away from what is happening. And that's why, like the NBA called for, there must be reforms. Because if there's no reform, see, I think it was Chidi Odekalu that was speaking yesterday, Professor Chidi Odekalu. He said judiciary is supposed to be the hope of the common man. But he said Nigeria judiciary has been the rope to hang the common man. And that's the country we've built. And when you see things across board happening, that's why you can see a reaction, to protests. Dr. Abati, you saw one of those reactions. Olokun came to visit you in the studio on This Day Live the other day.
Olokun that came to visit me. It was Mr. Malcolm.
Mr. Malcolm, but he was dressed like Olokun.
Too young, too small to receive Olokun in person.
Mr. Malcolm came to visit you. I mean, these are protests based on things that are happening in our society. And we can't just push these things away because, you see, where will the common man run to when he's denied of justice? If the Supreme Court cannot be fixed, how can the common man get justice? The last hope of the common man. So what society are we building? We're building a society that doesn't work for anybody. And Nigerians are very honorable people. I'm happy you talked about Kemi Adeosun. Nigerians are very honorable people, and people should just go straight to the point. Another person that comes to mind as regards resignation is Remi Babalola. Remi Babalola was Minister of State during Umar Musa Yar'Adua's tenure. He was the first person that complained that the NNPC was already bankrupt and going down. And you know what? They shut him down, and they sent him to be Minister of Special Duties. But he said he can't continue, so he said he resigned due to ill health. But we all know why Remi Babalola resigned, because he had to stand up for his integrity. And that's the country we have to build. And it segues into this, what is happening. Truck drivers that are key important parameters in the logistics value chain of this country. Their means of livelihood is being cut off to the point that they are protesting. And it is these people that carry goods out of the port for us. They had to send a save our soul message to the governor and the Speaker of the House in the state. What kind of country are we building? Prices of things are increasing. Service charge are going up by the day. Diesel that used to be 250 at a point now is 850, 900. That's even if you get in some areas. Most companies are projected to shut down because of the state of the economy. So nobody gives you a day off in Nigeria. It is always from one hardship to another. So what do you enjoy for being in a democracy? These are the questions we ask, just like a lot of people are asking, what justice have the average Nigerian enjoyed? when you see all the shenanigans going on in the Supreme Court? I mean, Tunga, Dr. Bati, I know you like to...
Well, for me, I'm generally sympathetic to protest because carrying a placard is nobody's idea of a good time. People resort to that when they feel really strongly aggrieved. And I feel for the truck drivers when you hear directly from them exactly what they're going through. And I do hope attention is paid to them. There is no reason for them to be extorted, to be assaulted, just because they're trying to do an honest day's work. This kind of thing should not even be happening at all. Well,
a Papa nightmare is a perennial source of nightmare for Nigerians, not just for the transporters that work there. There's a body called the National Association of Road Transport Workers of Nigeria, that operate those trucks. The major problem that they face is that, one, it's difficult to access the port, Apapa port in particular. There's also Tinkan in Lagos. Those two are the major focal points for importation and movement of goods in Nigeria. The other ports not having the appropriate draft, not being properly managed. And so this is what we're dealing with. Turnaround time was something that the government of the Jonathan administration tried to deal with. It worked for a while, but after that, since then, it has not worked again. So what do you have? Extortion, multiple extortion centers, as the protesters are pointing out. Mm-hmm. For you to get onto the A2 call-up system, electronic system, which was introduced by Adesua Bala Usman, but politicized the whole thing. Immediately she left it, nothing worked again. You pay 30,000 naira. But last month, we take 50,000 naira for you to work, and there's no receipt. Then you pay some other charges at different points. Okay, these truck drivers, how much do they earn? Most of them earn just about 130,000. If 2-3 units have already taken 100,000 of them, it's chaos, and that is transferred to the community. The road leading to the Apapa port is also bad. All kinds of things have been suggested. It has not worked. The people living in the neighborhood, they are fed up. Apapa used to be an elite neighborhood, where if you were told, oh, I live in Apapa, it used to be like a banana island. Yes. And what are these places where some of these people? Parkview, Parkview, like Koyi, But not anymore. It's a big slum now, an embarrassing slum. So you look at it in terms of cost to human health, to the environment, to movement of goods and services, to productivity is terrible. And one government after the other has not been able to solve the problem. The next government will come in next year. We'll still sit at this table and we'll still be talking about Apapa port and the nightmare of truck drivers trying to access Nigeria's major ports. The problem is that Nigeria is like a cycle of repetitive stupidity, as Wole Soyinka once put it.
No, but it's true.
We take one step forward, we take 2 steps forward. What Patutomi calls the recursive destiny of Nigeria. I hope one day we will find a solution to it.
It's sad, but it's true. That's all on News Headline. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll have Rotus, we have Michael to give us updates on Africa Global Business. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. For Global Business Update, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
So we got shares in Asia Pacific. That sort of rally didn't really last last night on Wall Street, and it was a rebound that didn't really happen. But for what it's worth, I'll give you where the market's right now. The Hang Seng down about 1%. The tech stocks down quite a lot. As far as Japan's concerned, the Nikkei up very, very slightly, Topic gaining about 0.5%, the Kospi down, mainland China stocks little changed. However, the most important takeaway from China, I think, this morning is that the People's Bank of China has said that it will still continue to be accommodative, as they put it, towards growth. The housing market in China China is slipping. That's according to shipping data. We're looking at things like furniture, home appliances, white goods like dishwashers and so on. The major slowdown in furniture and home decoration, which tends to point towards a slowdown in the housing market. Again, it's very, very difficult to get these kind of overall figures out, so we have to take these little scraps and make of it what we can. Staying with the property market, Evergrande, that the world's most indebted property developer, is opposing a wind-up petition that's been put up by a company called Topshine Global. They're on the hook for $110 million. This is the first winding up order that's actually been publicly disclosed by Evergrande. That's why I'm talking about it this morning. Evergrande itself, it says it's in a restructuring process, but again, to publicly acknowledge that is quite something really for a company like that. Tencent, staying with China, wants to be the foreign automakers' go-to company for tech in China's EV, electrical vehicle market. They've got the data storing. It's all about automotive driving, or autonomous driving systems, as they call them, giving drivers access to Tencent's social media and map apps as well. BMW and other manufacturers using Tencent's being a bit quiet about who they're actually dealing with. They regard that as being confidential information. Let's turn our attention to a very big struggler now in Asia. This is Sri Lanka. They've stopped non-essential petrol sales for 2 weeks. Only buses, trains and vehicles used for medical supplies will be allowed to have fuel from the pumps, not domestic consumers. Schools in urban areas have shut. And the officials have told the 22 million residents to work from home. And as you know, we've often talked about this on the programme. The South Asian company Nation is actually in talks over a bailout deal with the IMF as we speak. As far as the United States is concerned, stock futures have slipped again. I mentioned that rebound sort of failed yesterday. Futures down about 7 points on the Dow this morning. Modest losses on Wall Street. I mean, that comeback rally just didn't really work. Market bulls, as I understand it, are understandably a little sceptical about these rebounds and so on. Some less charitable people would call it a dead cat bounce, but we won't go there right now. The Wall Street hiring boom is apparently over. Look at the way that the broad-based employment started to pick up in 2019. About 13% at Goldman Sachs, 17% at Morgan Stanley. But since then, of course, equity markets and the capital markets revenue has fallen dramatically as the markets themselves have fallen on the cliff. So expect redundancies there. Perhaps some of those people might want to go training in their spare time. Nike expectations were topped by their earnings. Wall Street expected they've done better than expected fourth profit. Expect sales and profit in its fiscal fourth quarter. Inventory up to up 23% on what was on last year. It says it was continuing to monitor consumer behaviour, but don't seem to be doing too badly. Now, here's a strange one. We touched on this yesterday. The G7 meeting in Bavaria, they must be drinking something, because what they're saying is that they're going to put energy price caps to curb Russia revenues from oil. Now, how on earth are they going to achieve that? I mean, this is what the markets are saying. This is what commentators, including me, are saying this morning. China's getting cheap. They're paying $35 a barrel, less than the actual wholesale price of oil. India too. How are these countries actually going to pull together? How will G7 actually pull together to cut that revenue? I just simply don't think this is going to happen. But nevertheless, that's what G7 has been talking about. And as you know, Russia defaulted on its debt yesterday. Won't worry, Russia. They've got plenty of money, obviously from revenues, from oil revenues and so on, but they've got nowhere to spend it. Talking of hope over expectation, UK Cost of Living Minister David Buttress, there he is, has been asking UK firms to cut prices. That's, well, you know, surprise, surprise. He was talking to he used to be chairman of Just Eat. He was talking to the CBI, which is the sort of bosses organisation. Look at these shipping costs. I quoted some yesterday. I've got specifics for you. A fridge, shipped from China used to cost £10 to ship, now costs £100. So how are retailers actually going to cut costs apart from eating into their revenues? UK Royal Mail workers are the latest to vote for possible strike action. We'll know whether it's going to happen on the 19th of July. Prices are rising at the fastest pace, as you know, in the UK, 9.1 inflation, highest rate since March 1982, and on offer is 2%. They want a lot more than that. Now, finally, a bit of gossip for you. As far as commodities are concerned, this was overheard at the G7. Apparently, France's President Macron was overheard telling Joe Biden that the G7, that a call to the UAE and Saudi Arabia had achieved nothing. They said they were maxed out, as they put it, on production. The UAE released a statement actually saying, no, we're not maxed out, we're just obeying quotas. But anyway, that was enough to raise the oil price very, very slightly, about 2% to 115 overnight, and WTI to 110. That's the global view.
All right, well, Mark, okay. Dr. Machi, you want to go first?
Okay.
Go ahead.
I wanted to start with the meeting of the G7 that you talked about. The G7 proposing to put a price cap on Russian oil. And yes, what you said yesterday is that how would they be able to do this in real times? But there was another dimension to it. President Macron, who was in the video that was shown, was proposing that maybe perhaps sanctions should be lifted on Iran and Venezuela, and they should be brought back, to solve the problem of Russia blackmailing or putting everybody in a difficult situation. And he said, in fact, the price cap that is being proposed should not just be for Russia, but should be for all suppliers. Is that something that it's possible, that is achievable? That's an extension of the discussion, in my view. And then, of course, Russia going into default, the first time since the Bolshevik Revolution in 1918. Russia finance minister is saying, look, since 27th of May, they've made the $100 million available to meet their obligations. They even gave it to the bank, Evercare, but because of sanctions, they were blocked. So really, this default, disallowing Russia from meeting its obligations and saying it has gone into default, is it just merely symbolic, or is it a joke? Because, to find out what exactly has happened, I would like to know, how do you think the markets have been responding? Because the markets seem to be unconcerned. And then finally, Sri Lanka. How much longer will the people of Sri Lanka suffer? They've been trying to work out a loan deal with the IMF, $3 billion. The government says they will need $5 billion for even just 6 months of supply of food and groceries and all of that. They're looking to India. They can't get anything from India yet. They've gone to China. Nothing is happening. They've gone to Qatar. Nothing is happening. An entire country of 22 million people has just 9,000 metric tons of diesel supply, 6,000 of fuel. And they are now rationing fuel for 2 weeks. It won't take long before that country will grind to a complete halt. What do you think will happen next in Sri Lanka?
You've answered your own question about Sri Lanka. I mean, all the statistics are against it, aren't they, at the moment? Again, the blame, it's completely down to the country itself. This was happening a long, long time before the current crisis. And so really it needs solving for itself. I suspect the IMF will probably, and the World Bank will probably be quite strict about what they do. As far as China and India are concerned, well, as you know, again, we've said a lot of times in the past, both China and India are fighting over Sri Lanka. They always have. They've been doing, in fact, since it was Ceylon, they have as well. So I have no idea how it's going to play out. It looks desperate at the moment, and somebody really needs to step in. But the worries, I think, I think what we saw from G7, I mean, this is so indicative of what G7 has actually fallen to imagine there's going to be a price cap, and for Macron to think that everybody is going to approve of bringing Iran in and Venezuela. What sort of political message does that actually send out? It sent an enormous message to Russia saying, we're really sorry about the sanctions, and you're absolutely right, they don't work. Now we know they don't work because there's so much leakage of oil. It's eminently transportable. As far as we know, I mean, the tankers, like with the grain out being taken out of Ukraine, they just simply switch the guidance off. They disappear into a black hole. We've got actually no idea where these are at the moment. So there is absolutely no control over that. And it's complete posturing as far as G7 is concerned. As far as the Russian debt's concerned, I was saying yesterday, I don't think it makes any difference to them. They have the money, but it's not. But because they've been excluded from capital markets worldwide, they're finding it difficult to pay debt. So they don't pay. What are we going to do? I mean, what is the rest of the world actually going to do if they default on their loans? I mean, Russia has actually shown it doesn't really care about its overseas image, vis-a-vis happening to that supermarket yesterday. So, you know, they've stepped outside the bounds of reasonable behaviour. It seems as if the news that we're getting is correct about what's been happening, particularly about that supermarket yesterday, which seemed to me to be completely random, if it indeed is true, and I suspect it probably is, because we trust our news sources. A debt default is neither here nor there.
All right, Michael, real quickly, is the G7 even still relevant with all this shenanigan going on and with all these caps they envisage and with how much they've bungled this talks about a war and possibility in Africa going on in Ukraine? I asked that question deliberately because when you look at it critically, it's just been waste of money for the time they have talked at the G7. They've wasted close to 200 million euros at the German Bavarian mountains. They've gotten nothing out of it. They're not going to be able to put a resolution down. Their counterparts, BRIC nations, that has a bigger GDP and bigger wealth than the G7 nations, had their own meeting on video conferencing, and they reached better results. But now they've got no solution. And secondly, I'd like to know your take on, with the Supreme Court ruling, the $1.3 billion industry of Planned Parenthood and Planned Parenthood hospitals and PPFAs or hospitals as they're called. What becomes the lot of those hospitals with this Supreme Court ruling as regards Roe versus Wade?
You mean in the United States?
In the United States, yeah.
As far as their infrastructure plan is concerned for hospitals, I mean, what can I tell you about healthcare in the United States that you haven't heard already? It's a very, very difficult one, this, I have to say. I would hope that what's going to happen, and again, I don't want to get involved in this, but you've got to tie this abortion bill in as well. You know, with the whole way in which America is actually, appears to me at the moment to be fragmenting. I really have no idea how that's going to play at the moment. As far as what was your other question was about Russia, yes?
The G7, after talking for so much time, no resolution reached, no concrete ideas, nothing.
I'm sure, like you, I've been to many of these, and what it used to be was what I used to call the Sherpas. Used to go along, and you know, they would know what they were going to talk about before they actually sat down to talk. I'm absolutely with you on it. I don't see the purpose of it at all, quite honestly, these days. I think that what ought to happen is that the real exigency is about NATO, not about G7. It's about war, and it's about defence, and it's about people actually saying which side of the fence they're actually going to be on and how they actually deal with Russia. What we've seen has been political waffle as far as I'm concerned.
I want to talk about the continuing summer of discontent, and now the barristers are the ones on strike, walking out well, criminal barristers because of the low pay, and they've actually been offered 15% pay rise, which they rejected, and saying that the least they can accept is 25%. I know we talked, was it last week, my complete disdain for economic theories such as the wage price spiral, and I still feel the same way, because so much for economic theories and fat lot of good they did when central banks all over the world completely blundered on inflation.
Okay.
So I wanted to now ask you, the question is, I want to finish my sentence. It's important that I do. So on the other hand, you look at the private sector with companies like PwC is no longer called PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC offering their staff 7%. Other city firms will probably follow suit, offer pay rises, offer bonuses. Is it not inevitable that these pay rises that workers are protesting for, are they definitely not going to have to be given this 7%, 9%, whatever it might be?
As far as private industry is concerned, they'll do what they can. It's about public sector, which little bit of that is controlled by the government. As far as barristers are concerned, actually, against popularity, they don't actually earn a great. The little ones, the beginners, can be earning about £9,000 a year, which is even below the minimum wage in the country. It's the high flyers that earn the big bucks. The little ones probably don't. I mean, I don't really understand how they stand outside courts, because what I thought was they're like private little businesses. They've all got their chambers and they make their money on which actually cases come in and how successful they are. I don't really see how. I mean, they will get paid a basic, but that's not going to go up. Wage spiral is an interesting one, actually. I was reading over the weekend, if you really want to get involved in wage spiral and what happened with as Rafai talks about quite regularly, Paul Volcker in the United States, he actually increased interest rates above inflation at the time, or very close to the level of inflation, which was huge, about 17%. That's how you get things down. But yes, a wage spiral does exist, because a wage spiral, if wages go up, takes you towards stagflation, because you have these massive pay awards which seem to be above, and everybody wants to join in. If he's getting that or she's getting that, why can't I? That's how wage spirals actually work, and the country simply can't afford them. And I think what we're seeing at the moment, there certainly is a great deal of discontent, but there are lots of noisy voices at the moment, and we haven't actually heard how this is actually going to be dealt with at the moment. Somebody, I was reading yesterday, it's a good idea that Boris Johnson is away at the moment. Why doesn't he just stay away for a long time and things would probably work themselves out? And again, to have a price minister, as I was reporting this morning, telling industry to cut its prices, I mean, really, you know, how, and this is a chap who was chairman of a company called Just Eat, which is a commercial company. What sort of response did he feel he was going to get? Yes, a wage spiral is very, very damaging indeed, and let's hope we avoid it. At the moment, you've got a lot of people with competing demands, and yes, it's going to be a summer of discontent, no question about that, but a wage spiral is an absolute definite.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Now our dependable Rotis Adiri is here to give us an African business update. Good morning, Rotis. Good morning,
Tundu. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, Doctor. You all have to take a look at the front page of channeling Emmanuel Efeni. The front page of today's This Day newspaper. That it's a thorough investigation from the This Day team that looked at the fact that Nigeria is now depending more on the internally generated revenue of the Federation than oil receipts. The FIRS, for instance, if you look at contributions to FAC, the Federal Accounts Allocation Committee, FIRS contributed almost 60%, about 59.4, 59.5 to FAC in 2021. That's about 5.9 trillion out of about 8.6 or so. That was actually 5.2 trillion out of 8.9 in 2021, which is very interesting when you consider the fact that the NNPC has not been able to remit funds to the Federation accounts due to the increased subsidy bill, right? Again, in May, NNPC was not able to remit anything because subsidy is gulping up all that's supposed to be going to the Federation account. Think back to when we were producing 2 million barrels of oil per day. Contributions to FAC were not even up to what revenue from oil was, but that has now flipped. Now you are seeing the states depending more on the internally generated revenue of the Federation, and I have to point this out. When you look at excise duties, value-added tax and so on and so forth. So it's a real, it's alarm bells for the nation to the fact that now you have to lean more on the ability to collect taxes and so on and so forth to be able to augment what we are losing from oil receipts. And so, you put subsidy, you take the subsidy on one hand, you take oil theft on the other hand, and Nigeria can't depend on oil as she used to. So it's a very, very interesting story, very interesting investigation there on our front page. Also, since everyone's talking about prices, are you better off now in 2022 than you were in 2015? Would you?
Never.
No? So business day, remember the president's interview with Bloomberg where he said he's leaving a better economy today for his successor than when he came in. So business, why are you making sounds? Business day put together just some comparisons. I mean, I think we're all aware of this, right? GDP per capita, $2,700 in 2015, it's 2002 now. Total debts, 12 trillion back then, 41 trillion now. Inflation, 9.617 now. Unemployment, 10.4 is 33 now. Well, 33 as at Q4, and actually that should say 2022, excuse me, not 2020. Oil production, 2 million barrels. I just mentioned oil production a moment ago, talking about FAC allocations, 1.2 now. And then the misery index, when you combine a number of factors, inflation, unemployment, and how people feel about that, 38.7, 73.4. Then you look at prices, right? I was watching that protest about the tanker drivers and what they're talking about, what they were saying about diesel. I mean, every metric, and this is why a lot of folks tend to question the inflation figures, right? Because every single increase you're looking at, from flour, bread, rice, pasta, fish, palm oil, crate of eggs, diesel, cooking gas, a domestic flight, everything is in triple digits. It's, so yeah, one does need to ask themselves that question when they're talking about where we are today versus 2015. And then, have you seen this meme? The petrol price represented by a cheetah, food represented by horses, electricity represented by a deer, transportation a hare, and then income. Remember the wage, the wage thing, and then the income is represented by a tortoise. Foreign exchange. Central Bank Governor Gordon Emefiele was at the opening of the regional course on exchange rate regimes and policies organized by the West African Institute for Financial and Economic Management, WAFEM. He was represented by the CBN's Deputy Director of Monetary Policy Department, Mrs. Omolara Duke, where he says FX policy is aimed at the Naira value. I mean, it was just essentially saying, look, price stability is our mission, stable economic environment. He also mentioned, a market, the aim was to get a market-determined exchange rate based on normal factors to try to curb speculation and the like. Zimbabwe has hiked their monetary policy rate, I think, to 200% from 80%. It's essentially, inflation now in Zimbabwe is at 191. I had a conversation yesterday on Arise Exchange with Eddie Cross. He's an economist in Harare, and I asked him, what does the average Zimbabwean do about the income that they are earning in their local currency compared to where inflation is? And here's what he said.
Savings and your earnings are in local currency, you're stitched. You're drowning. Your money is evaporating. I doubt today if my personal pension is worth a third of what it was worth last month.
Wow.
And that's really, if I didn't have revenue, an income stream in hard currency from other sources, I'd be in dire straits. But that's the reality, and we've got to get to grips with it. We need our own local currency. I completely agree with us continuing with our local currency, but we've got to start behaving according to the rules that apply to international monetary markets. Everybody else does. China does. The United States does. Europe does. We are the exception in Africa. I mean, even Somalia has adopted a similar package of measures and have a stable currency now. Even Somalia, for God's sake, we are much bigger and much more sophisticated than Somalia. But still, we persist. And I think it's because of entrenched interests. People are making so much money out of this situation that you can't believe it. And that's the problem. What we've got to do is adopt strategies and policies which will basically protect the poor guy.
Thank you very much, Roches.